الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين ولا عاقبة للمتقين ولا عدوان إلا على الظالمين ونصلي ونسلم على المبعوث رحمة للعالمين سيد الأولين والآخرين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه ومن استنى بسنته وسار على نهجه واهتدى بهديه إلى يوم الدين وارض اللهم عنا معهم اللهم آمين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. As we do, we begin by a brief summary of the previous lesson. In it, we discussed number 1, مراتب التلاوة, and number 2, البسملة, عفوا استعاذة, and then basmala individually, not in unison. So مراتب التلاوة, we said it is to do with what? With the pace of recitation, صح? With how quickly or how slowly you're reciting. We said that the pace of recitation has no impact on the changing of harakat. Meaning what is one haraka will always be one haraka, what is 2 harakat will always be 2 harakat, what is 4 is 4, 6 is 6. The only thing that changes is the relativity of those harakats. So if you're reciting slowly, everything becomes stretched out. If you're coming quickly, everything gets condensed. But all 3 maratib, had, tadwir, and tahqiq, have what in them? Tartil. As Allah said, وَرَتِّلِ الْقُرْآنَ تَرْتِيلًا. It is a command, and we always should do our best to follow that command. Jamil. We also said, or discussed, the isti'adha and the basmala. What they mean, the ruling, when to say them out loud or not out loud, etc., etc. We said that we recite the isti'adha before reciting the Quran. It is not sinful if you don't, but you should. We also said, very briefly, this is a quick summary regarding the basmala, is that in Hafs and Asim, we always say the basmala in the beginning of the surah, whether we're about to begin from the beginning of the surah or we just finished the surah and we're reciting the surah after it, we also say the basmala. Jameel. And we said that in the middle, you have a choice depending on the context when it comes to basmala. I think that's a brief summary of everything that we discussed. طيب. Today, inshallah ta'ala, we'll be discussing number 1, an exception to the basmala rule, which is Surah Bara'ah, Surah Tawbah. And number 2, we'll be discussing, after we finish that, the isti'adha, basmala, and the beginning of the surah in terms of different ways to do waqf and wasl. Whether you recite it all in one go, you stop after each one. And the same thing from the end of one surah and the beginning of the next. Inshallah ta'ala. That'll be the first thing. And then we'll see how it goes from there. طيب. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So, isti'adha. أو الاستعاذة. Continue. طيب. The reason why we recite al-basmala in the beginning of every surah, number 1 is obviously a passed down tradition, and al-qira'atu sunnatun muttaba'. That the recitation is a followed sunnah. It's not something that you choose what to do with depending on your own desires and wants. But from a historical perspective or from a fiqh perspective, very briefly, the Sahaba would say لم نكن نعلم متى تنتهي السورة وتبدأ التي بعدها حتى نسمع بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. We would not know when one surah would finish and the next would begin until we heard بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. طيب. This is, for the record, one of the evidences for reciting the Bismillah out loud as opposed to secretly. But that's once again a different discussion, and we don't want to get too involved from a jurisprudence perspective. We're going to stick to Tilawa and Tajweed as much as possible. طيب. The exception to this rule regarding the Bismillah, doesn't matter which qira'ah, which riwayah that you're doing, is Surah Bara'ah or Surah At-Tawbah. The beginning, براءة من الله ورسوله إلى الذين عاهدتم من المشركين. You do not recite before it the Bismillah. Whether you're continuing from the surah before, the ending of Surah Al-Anfal, or you're beginning from that, from the surah itself. You treat the beginning exactly as you treat any middle of any surah. Meaning, you wouldn't say the Bismillah necessarily. But what you would do is recite the Ista'adh. So, what you would say is أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم براءة من الله ورسوله, etc. Now, there are many theoretical reasons which a lot of the scholars have given as to why that is. Why is it that specifically Surah At-Tawbah does not have a Bismillah written? Obviously, the Sahaba, when they compiled the Mus'haf, they did it in writing. Not only was it originally orally transmitted, but also it was a written tradition. Going back to what we're saying, Surah At-Tawbah is the only surah that does not have Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim written in the beginning. طيب. Some scholars have said that it is not, it does not go with the theme of the surah. The Bismillah means what? In the name of Allah, the owner of mercy, the giver of mercy. Rough translation. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Mercy. And then what's the first ayah? براءة من الله ورسوله إلى الذين عاهدتم من المشركين. Allah is innocent and His Prophet from those who you have given allegiances of the mushrikeen. Very harsh statement. And it continues like that. The surah is discusses a lot about hypocrites fighting for the sake of Allah. Quite harsh themes. Or not harsh. I don't think harsh is the right word, but it is a manifestation of the intiqam or jabarut of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as opposed to His rahmah and wood subhanahu wa ta'ala. طيب. There are many other reasons that many of the scholars give, and that's the most common theoretical one. Ultimately, as Qurra, as we hope you all are, that is not which interests us. It may be a wisdom that this is the case why we don't say the Bismillah in the beginning of Bara'ah, but ultimately the real reason, the Prophet ﷺ did recite. He ﷺ did not recite it, did not teach the Sahaba to recite it, they did not write it in the Mus'haf, so we don't. سمعنا وأطعنا. كل من عند الله. آمنا به كل من عند الله. When we believe in all of it, it is all from Allah. No questions asked. There may be potential wisdoms and reasonings behind it, but the real ultimate reason is because the Prophet ﷺ didn't, neither did his Sahaba radiyallahu anhu. So we don't. Simple as that. Jameel. That's clear, inshallah. So you would recite the Ista'adha at the beginning of the surah. Let's say I'm about to recite and I'm starting from Surah Tawbah. I'll recite the Ista'adha, would not recite the Bismillah, then recite the beginning of the surah. Another discussion is the middle of the surah. So everything after the beginning. So any ayah after the beginning, should I recite the Bismillah? Is it okay to recite the Bismillah or not? Some have taken the original ruling based on number one, that the Bismillah is not in the beginning, so it shouldn't be anywhere else. Others have said no, the middle of Surah Tawbah is exactly the same as the middle of any other surah. So it depends on the context. And obviously there are any ayat where it would be befitting to say, so إِنَّ اللَّهَ اشْتَرَى مِنْ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ أَنفُسَهُمْ وَأَمْوَالَهُم بِأَنَّ لَهُمُ الْجَنَّةَ يُقَاتِلُونَ فِي. Meaning is, it is also a mercy of after the verse of mercy, a verse of Jannah. So it may be befitting then to recite the Basmala. Others have said, regardless of what is after the surah, we can't recite the Basmala. Whichever opinion you follow is not a big deal. But what is important definitely is that there's no Basmala in the beginning. The middle, there's leniency perhaps, but the beginning, there is no Basmala. I think that covers that. Any questions? Now we're going to move on to the method or the way that you recite those three elements which we discussed last week and briefly today. Meaning, number one is what? What's the first thing you say when you recite? And then? And then? The surah. So, isti'adha, basmala, and the beginning of the surah, or whichever section you're about to recite. So now we're going to take a beginning of a surah, we'll take al-Fatiha, and we'll discuss the valid ways in which you can recite those three combinations in terms of waqf and ibtida, in terms of linking them together or stopping between. So as we said, we have three elements. This is isti'adha for sure, yeah? So we're going to write a lot. طيب. Let's see how your math or logic is. How many possible ways are there to link between those two? Often, between those three.
8.
8? It's not 8.
7.
It's not 7. It's 4. It's 4. I'm going to say it very quickly, then we can go through them thoroughly, yeah? Link between all of them. Split between all of them. Link the first two. Stop after that, and then begin with the third. Say the first one, and link the second two. That's 4. Don't worry if you didn't get that, we're going to do it properly now. So, here are the 4 ways, yeah? 1, 2. The first way to recite the isti'adha, basmala, and surah in terms of linking them together or stopping is, we're going to say, stopping after each one. The comma here is to indicate stop. Yeah? Does that make sense? So A, stop, B, stop, C. Meaning isti'adha, stop, B, stop, and then the surah. So you'd say, if you take al-Fatiha as an example, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين. Make sense? Clear enough, yeah? Number 2. All of them join together. The isti'adha, then the basmala, then the beginning of the surah, all in one breath, no stopping. Yeah? With this one, it's important to mention something very quickly, yeah? Specifically when it comes to the topic of mudud, it's going to be very important to appreciate something called as-sukun al-arid. Yeah. Which is essentially temporary sukun. There is something called sukun asli and sukun arid. Sukun asli is something, is sukun because that word has sukun in it, in that particular way. Sukun arid, it's a temporary sukun due to something happening. In our case, it's because of stopping. Here's a very important rule, yeah? You kind of know it already. You always apply it without realizing, but perhaps you've never thought about it in a strict manner. Anytime you stop on any word in the Quran when reciting, the last letter of that word gets a sukun. What's the nature of that sukoon? It's a temporary sukoon. Once you go back and carry on, then that sukoon is removed and the original haraka comes back. To give you a very simple example, we always say, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, Ar-Rahmanir Rahim, Maliki Yawmiddin. If you open any mushaf, you're going to see that the noon in Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen does not have sukoon, has a fatha. And you're going to see that and the meme in Ar-Rahim has a kasra. And the noon in Deen has also a kasra. So what we're doing reciting the sukoon then? It's something that we do all the time without even thinking about it. The reason why we do that is because whenever you stop on a word in the Quran, the last letter of that word gets a temporary sukoon. Is that clear? Inshallah. This is very important when discussing this stuff. Here we said what? أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Yeah? Whereas linguistically, the meme in Rajim actually has a kasra. You're not going to see the isti'adha in your mushaf because it's not actually written there, but أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم, the meme in Rajim has a kasra. Also in the Basmala, the meme in Ar-Rahim has a kasra. So, because I'm not going to be stopping, I'll have to be reciting the haraka and not that sukoon that I was reciting before. Make sense? طيب, that is why when I'm reciting this now, I'm going to recite it like so. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين. Do you see? Both of the memes, now you can hear the haraka. Why? Because it didn't stop on them. So there's no reason to give them a sukoon. Clear, inshallah, yeah? Makes sense? I guess makes sense, maybe not now. But at some stage it would make sense to write the isti'adha here. So if you can remind me again, just so that everyone can get a look at exactly how the isti'adha is written, just in case I forget, because it's not written in the mushaf. So just they know exactly how it looks. If you can remind me, inshallah, at some stage in the end. Right, let's go back to what we're doing then. Number one is stop after each one. Isti'adha, stop, basmala, stop, then the surah. Number two is link between all of them. Number three is what? It's your choice. Okay, you've got to left, choose one of them.
B and C.
That be very clear in what you're saying. So
Basmala and surah.
So isti'adha, stop, basmala and surah, yeah? Jameel. So we're gonna codify that by saying obviously the comma, in the case of stop, the plus means that you link it together. It's just very easy, a lot easier to write it that way as opposed to writing out each time, yeah? I'm sure you know what I'm saying. So say that isti'adha, stop, basmala at the beginning of the surah, both of them in one go. The meme in Ar-Rajim, in the isti'adha, what's it going to have in this case? How am I going to? It always has a kasra, but because I'm stopping on it, it's going to get a temporary sukoon. Yeah?
Yes.
Makes sense? But the meme in Ar-Rahim, I'm going to be able to hear the kasra in it? Yes or no?
No.
I will be, because I'm going to be linking it to the beginning of the surah after it. So remember, whenever you have a linking after it, you're going to have to place the haraka at the end of the word. If you're stopping, then automatically you get sukoon. So always keep that in mind, yeah? طيب, number three practically is أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين. Make sense? And the last one, by default. Link A and B. And then stop and say the beginning of the surah. So we say, is that clear? Inshallah it is. we'd say in that case, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين. Yep. So those are the four possible ways to recite the isti'adah, the basmala, and the beginning of the surah. And always, if you're linking between them, you're going to have to keep in mind how to do so. So we said that the meme in Ar-Rajim, in the isti'adah, has a kasra, and the meme in Ar-Rahim, in the basmala, also has a kasra. So always going to keep that in mind. You must keep that in mind when linking between B was after or A was after. If you're stopping, then obviously you're going to get an automatic sukun, no problem. Any questions? No questions, yeah? Nice and clear. Alhamdulillah. Let's, while we're at it, cover the exception, which is what? What's the exception?
You've got to write the isti'adah now or later.
Inshallah, I'll do this final point and then write the isti'adah so that everyone can see it, inshallah. So what's the exception to the general rule when it comes to isti'adah and basmala and all that jazz? We just mentioned in the beginning. Surah Al-Tawbah, Surah Al-Bara'ah, Jameel. So now a specific category for Surah Al-Tawbah. Question: how many possible variations are there? So this is for any beginning of surah, isti'adah, basmala, and then the surah itself. How many do I have for Surah Tawbah? What do you think? Think about it logically. What do you say?
2.
Why?
Because you say أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم and then go to the surah without saying basmala.
That's one. And the other one is split between them. You're correct. So the Ahsan, well done. The reasoning is this disappears. Now you're left with 2. There's no basmala. We just said that in the beginning of Surah Tawbah, there's no basmala. Therefore, you only recite in the isti'adah and the beginning of the surah. Because you only have 2 options, the outcome is also 2 options. Either you say both of them together, or you say one, stop, say the other one. Yeah? So we write that for Surah Tawbah then. Somebody comes in the thing that's the mattress or something. So those are my 2 options. Let me write that again because maybe a bit low. Hopefully that's clear. So practically speaking, the first option in Surah Tawbah is similarly to here, but without the basmala. Say, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم براءة من الله ورسوله إلى الذين عاهدتم من المشركين. Yep. Second option. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم براءة من الله ورسوله إلى الذين عاهدتم من المشركين. Make sense? Any questions? The questions. طيب. We'll get rid of that. Hopefully it's clear. أنا هذا الاستعاذة منه إن شاء الله. طيب, the isti'adha, intended to write this last week because I know it's not the mushaf, so some people may perhaps would like a visual presentation of how it's actually written. So here it is. Is that too low? That wasn't clever of me. We'll do it. So as you can see, what concerns us for the moment is the fact that on the mean, linguistically speaking, there's a customer. Yeah. So we're gonna have to keep that in mind when discussing everything that we just mentioned. In terms of linking it, we're going to have to say the customer on the mean and not simply say sukun. Hopefully that's clear. طيب. Take it off. Well, now we're going to discuss a similar concept, but not from the beginning now. We're going to say that I finished the surah and I'm beginning the next one. I'm reciting, as always, in the riwayah of Hafs from his teacher Asim al-Kufi. The end of the surah, the basmala, and the beginning of the surah. So now I have three new elements. So I have the end of the first of the surah that I'm reciting, whatever surah it is, the basmala, which is at the beginning of the next one, that I must recite as we said last lesson, and then the beginning of the surah that I'm about to recite. So those are the new three elements. Question: how many mathematical ways is it possible to join between those three, mathematically or logically? From a logical perspective. Three. It's not 3, no. It's exactly the same. It's 4. Exactly the same as before. Because we have 3 options, still the 3 options. Logically speaking, there are 4 ways to link between them, as there was the Isti'adha, Basmala, and the beginning of the surah. You can say all of them split up, so A, stop, B, stop, then C. You can link all between them. The beginning, link between the 2, the first 2, and then the last one. From a logical perspective, mathematically. Slight twist, only 3 of those 4 are valid. Let's go through them first, and then decide which one is invalid, or you can't recite in it, and why. Okay, number 1, it's exactly the same as before. And the comma once again represents a stop. Let's take, I mean, we can take the Fatiha, but it's going to take some breath. We'll take it anyway. So the ending of Fatiha, al-Basmala, then the beginning of Surah Al-Baqarah. Stopping after each section, I would say غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ألف لام ميم. Clear. What's number 2? The opposite.
A plus B plus C.
Linking all of them together, yeah? So now we need a lot of breath, specifically for Al-Fatiha and Al-Baqarah. So you'd say غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ألف لام ميم. That's your second option. Can't go under the slang, so we have to take it off, yeah? But you know what it is. Yeah? Number 3 and number 4 then. Number 3 you're going to say is A, stop, B, C together. Practically it would be what? غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ألف لام ميم. The final logical option is what?
A plus B comma C.
أحسنت. طيب, in the 4 that we just mentioned, let's actually give it the practical example first. Practically, how would that sound? غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ألف لام ميم. Practically speaking, we said in the beginning there's 4 logical options, but only 3 valid ones. طيب, the first one is stop after each one. Second one, link all of them together. Third one, first one stop, the link between the second 2. Fourth one, both of the first 2 together, and then say the third one. Which one's invalid? Which one can I not recite with, and why?
The last one.
I can't recite that one. But what's the reason? Why is that the case?
Because you can't just say Basmala, the end of the surah, and then Basmala, and then stop, and then the next surah.
So why is that? Yes, you're right. technically.
It doesn't make sense.
Pretty much, yeah, it doesn't make sense. The basmala is for what? Is it for the ending of the surah? Or is it the beginning of the surah?
The beginning.
The beginning of the surah, right? You say the basmala at the beginning of the surah, don't say the end. The way I recited that last time gives you the impression that what? The basmala is to do with the end of the surah as opposed to the beginning of the next one. So it's invalid. You can't recite like this. Yeah? So those are the 4 valid ways, but that which I cannot recite with is the last one, so we're going to rub it out. And we could have left it really and just put a big cross next to it. We cannot say the last one that I just did. Why? Because it makes the basmala as part at the end of the first surah as opposed to at the beginning of the one after. Is that clear?
Yeah.
جميل. طيب. Now let's go once again to our exception of a surah. What is our exception of a surah? التوبة. طيب. What's the surah before التوبة? Anfal. What is the ending of Anfal? أحسنت. إن الله بكل شيء عليم. إن الله بكل شيء عليم. So that's the ending of Surah Al-Anfal. We said that unequivocally, At-Tawbah does not have a basmala. The start is bara. We also said that the isti'adah is only for the beginning when you're about to recite. So if you're reciting on Anfal, you've already said isti'adah a long time ago. You don't even say the isti'adah again. Question: how many possible combinations are there in terms of stopping and starting and linking them together?
2.
طيب, let's start with 2. First of all, which one is missing from these 3 in Surah At-Tawbah? Between Anfal and Tawbah, what's missing from these 3? The basmala. There's no basmala. So we have number 1, exactly the same as before. We have C, and number 2 is what?
A plus C.
So the first option practically is what? إن الله بكل شيء عليم براءة من الله ورسوله إلى الذين عاهدتم من المشركين. Essentially, as if it's just another ayah. So it's as if just the next ayah they're reciting in any other surah. طيب. Second option is saying them both in one go without stopping. So what's on the mean? Your linguist. Huh?
Kasra.
It's not a kasra. Tanween what? صح. عليم. So you'd say إن الله بكل شيء عليم براءة من الله ورسوله إلى الذين عاهدتم من المشركين. There's a third one. There's a third possibility, and I'll be very impressed if any of you know what it is.
A plus, comma C.
How would that sound? A plus comma C. You want to explain how that sounds then?
You see the last ayah,
Technically, actually, it's all correct.
and then you say the bara, and then you stop, and then carry on.
Not quite, no. طيب. فتح الله عليك. جزاك الله خير. Sector. So what is a sector?
You pause between.
Pause. It's a different from stop, right?
Yeah.
So what is the difference between waqf and sect?
Of course, you take a breath. And sector is you hold your breath.
That's right. طيب. So to repeat that in case it wasn't heard, a sect in the Quran is different from a waqf. In that, a waqf, you stop, take a break, deep breath, cup of tea, carry on. With a sect, it's very short, and you take no breath. Yeah. Exists in many places. Probably the most famous is in Qiyamah, وَقِيلَ مَنْ رَاقٍ, and obviously same as Mutaffifin as well. كَلَّا بَلْ رَانَ عَلَى قُلُوبِهِمْ many others is Yasin, Kahf, Haqqa. Yeah. So the idea of a sect is that whilst I'm reciting, I stop without saying the harakah because I'm essentially stopping, but that stop is such that I take no breath and it's very short. Some scholars estimate it as the same length of a ghun or mad tabi'i, meaning two harak, roughly. Yeah. Practically, then, just write it down. We indicate with a dot. Although technically the dot should be the comma and the comma should be a dot. But anyway, it would be, practically speaking, إن الله بكل شيء عليم براءة من الله ورسوله. Yeah? You see how that's different from إن الله بكل شيء عليم براءة من الله ورسوله. Difference, right? What we always do between ayat, in the middle of an ayah when we run out of breath, is waqf. You only ever do sakt in tilawat al-Quran when it's specifically passed down from a particular way. Don't do it haphazardly. It's not just up to you to do whatever. Yeah? So here is one of those moments, is that you do a sakt between the ending of Surah Al-Anfal and the beginning of Bara. For the record, it's not necessarily just the end of Al-Anfal. Let's say you were going to recite any other surah in its end and you just wanted to recite Surah Bara after. So some surahs before At-Tawbah, and you didn't want to go through all the rest until you got to At-Tawbah, and you wanted to link straight away. That's also applies. Jameel. Any questions? No? Alhamdulillah. So here we go. Well, that is pretty much all there is to say about the isti'adah and the basmala and the beginning of the surah, or the end of one surah basmala and the beginning of the next surah. There is perhaps one thing to mention, but it's not, doesn't concern us. Why? Because primarily we recite from Tariq al-Shatibiyyah. When we recite in Hafs, we recite from Tariq Ubayd al-Sabbah. Without getting too technical, from Tariq al-Tayyibah, you can add takbir, tahleel, and even tahmid or tasbih, specifically after Surah Al-Duha. So that's from Tariq al-Tayyibah though, mainly. So you'd say, for example, وَأَمَّا بِنِعْمَةِ رَبِّكَ فَحَدِّثْ اللَّهُ أَكْبَرُ وَلِلَّهِ الْحَمْدُ وَلَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهُ بِسْمِ اللَّهِ الرَّحْمَنِ الرَّحِيمِ أَلَمْ نَشْرَحْ لَكَ صَدْرَكَ. And you do that at the end of every surah, at the beginning of the next, until you finish the Quran. And some turuq can even do it from the beginning, so from the ending of Fatiha until the Nas. But for our purposes, Hafs and Asim, Tariq wa Ubayd al-Sabbah, don't have that. طيب? That's just something to keep in mind. That's all. Any questions about isti'adah, basmala, and all that jazz? No? طيب. Now we're actually going to go back into that which we mentioned a very long time ago. Actually, it was the first lesson when we categorized the theory of Tajweed into three main categories. What we're going to do now that we had a nice long introduction of a lot of important concepts, we're actually going to get into the nitty-gritty. What were the three main aspects of theoretical Tajweed? Say that again? That's more linguistically. Like we're talking about theoretically, what does Tajweed entail? Three main topics. So that comes under what?
Tajweed.
أحكام التجويد. الأحكام. Third part. First part is مخارج الحروف. Second part is صفات الحروف. Third part is أحكام التجويد. Like غنة, مد, إدغام, إظهار, and all that stuff. There's مخارج الحروف, the articulation or the exit points of the 28 Arabic letters, and even the elongations as well. Number two, صفات الحروف. Once I'm able to describe exactly where that letter exits from, how does it sound? What other features, attributes, characteristics does it have? And finally, rulings of recitation. We're going to take them one by one, inshallah, and eventually go through all of them in some detail, inshallah ta'ala, billahi tawfiq. We'll start with مخارج الحروف. Subhanallah. I think we're going to start now. We'll probably just give a very brief introduction then. We won't get into anything. Okay, what we mentioned now then is everything you as a human being use to recite the Quran. All the main faculties or tools of pronunciation that you use as a reciter of the Quran. We're just going to mention that very briefly without any detail, and we'll leave it at that as a cliffhanger for you to come back next time, inshallah. Articulation or exit points of the letters. Let's actually intuitively work through them. What do you think you actually use when you recite the Quran? You use your left foot? لا. You use your liver? لا. Because we haven't got a lot of time, there are 5 faculties or tools in your body that Allah has given you that you use for pronunciation, for reciting the Quran. Nothing more, nothing less. So once you mention these 5, you can't really add anything else, or you can't take anything away. Everything's vital and it's very holistic at the same time. Number 1, we'll say al-jawf. What is al-jawf? It is the oral cavity, or the emptiness in the chest and the throat. I'm going to throw a term out there. We probably won't understand fully what it means, but it's a non-specific makhraj. We're going to come to what that actually means. It's a non-specific makhraj. What you use to say al-jawf, or what you use al-jawf for rather, we're also going to come to that. Second is, we're going to say al-khayshum, or the nasal passage. Once again, what you use that for, we can come to it. Then there's al-halq, the throat, al-lisan, the tongue, and al-shafatan, the lips. Nothing more, nothing less. Now, something to keep in mind is that when we say al-lisan, for example, we actually do mean everything in the mouth with it. It's not just the lisan itself. The reason why we mention al-lisan as opposed to the teeth or hanak al-a'la is because it's the tongue that's doing the work. And then everything else is being still and just being used by the tongue. That's why I mentioned lisan. But it's not just the lisan by itself. It's a lisan interacting with that which is in your mouth. Yeah. Just a quick subtlety, just so that there's no confusion, inshallah. So we'll write them down very, very quickly, and then we're going to put them in, inshallah. So, number 1 was what? This list if you're awake. Number 1 was? Al-jawf. So, al-jawf. Al-jawf. Or oral cavity. And يعني that sounds fancy, but really all it means that just the emptiness in your lungs and your throat. That's all it is, yeah. So let me just keep taking them down then, because I can't write under this line. على كل حال. What's number 2? The thing that you mentioned? الخيشوم, صح. 2 was الخيشوم. And what does that mean in the Quran? Nasal passage. Nasal cut doesn't really matter. Nasal passage. طيب. What was number 3? And what does الحلق mean?
The throat.
Throat. The throat, I'm going to write down the throat, and finally, not finally, penultimately,
The tongue.
اللسان. Last but not least, الشفتين.
The lips.
أحسنت بارك الله فيك. طيب, that's just a very brief introduction to Makharij. We're actually going to get into it properly next term, inshallah. The point is, that's everything that you use. You don't use.
What do you forget?
Afwan?
You reckon there's another part that you.
Go ahead.
I meant the hands as well.
The hands.
Yeah, because when you open it, it's
MashaAllah, tabarakallah. MashaAllah, I have a funny brother here, MashaAllah. طيب, nothing more, nothing less. Those 5. Not your eyes, not your anything else. Just الجوف, خيشوم, حلق, لسان, شفتان.
How about the nose when you use gum?
So that is what we mean when we say al-khayshum, the nasal passage or the nasal cavity is to do with the nose. We just don't say the nose because the nose is the bit outside. We're talking about the inside. That's the only reason. But you're right, definitely right. Any other questions? Like to mention today? جزاكم الله خيرا والله أعلم وصلى الله وسلم على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. بارك الله فيك.